Welcome, everybody. My name is Gil Smart. I'm a columnist here with TCPalm, and welcome to TCPalm editorial board meeting to interview candidates for the 19th Circuit Court Judge Group 11. As noted, I'm columnist Gil Smart. I'm joined by fellow editorial board member Larry Reisman, columnist and community editor, and Louise Philippine, reader advisory board member. I will lead today's questioning and open it up to the other board members at the end. Kelly Rogers is directing the video coverage, and if we get questions from our social media audience, we may decide to pose one or two of those questions at the end of the session. I want to thank our candidates, Victoria Griffin and Lou Larson, for streamlining this process by completing the questionnaires ahead of time. Our board members have reviewed their questionnaires. Those questionnaires can be found at tcpalm.com/elections, along with other stories, videos, and information about the August 18th election. At the conclusion of this interview, editorial board members will discuss possibly writing an editorial to recommend a candidate in this race. We've got several questions today, and we might end up having more of a conversation than just a simple Q&A. Our goal is to be completed in about 45 minutes to an hour. Because of the time constraints, we ask the candidates keep their answers concise and be respectful of others. We will start today's questioning with the incumbent, Ms. Griffin. Number one question here is has to do, it says, many of our audience members aren't as familiar with judicial candidates as they are with other type of candidates like county commissioner, that sort of thing. Tell us a little bit about your background and what qualifies you for this office, or why voters should return you to office.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to thank TCPalm for putting this together. This is a very important topic of conversation to get out there. And as you stated, a lot of people do not know the judicial candidates unless they've had an opportunity to find themselves in court. My background is I'm a second generation, born and raised on the Treasure Coast, actually Fort Pierce. My parents were both born and raised here. I'm married. I have two children who are in local schools. I've been licensed to practice law for about 17 years. 5.5 of those years has been while sitting on the circuit court bench for the 19th Judicial Circuit. I graduated from Nova Southeastern University, cum laude, and my legal work prior to becoming a circuit court judge was in the field of contract law, contracts, corporations, landlord-tenant disputes, condominium foreclosures, probate, guardianship, things such as that. I also served as in-house counsel for a private holding company whose holdings included items such as sand and gravel mining, trailer and container manufacturing, and NASCAR racing as well, which was very interesting. I've served for 4 years in Indian River County. My assignment was in Indian River County for the first 4 years since I've been on the judiciary. And that was in the areas of probate, guardianship, juvenile dependency, juvenile delinquency, drug court, which included all of the drug courts in the circuit, including juvenile drug court, dependency drug court, as well as felony drug court. And there was also some veterans court in there until they moved it over to the mental health side. And I also was in charge and presided over mental health and substance abuse cases. The last 2 years, actually last year and a half, my assignment has been in St. Lucie County for the Domestic Relations Division, which is the family division. I preside over dissolutions, paternities, child support, adoptions, protective injunctions, things such as that. I believe that I am the right candidate for this position because I am the only one with a judicial experience. I love what I do. I have a good record with what I do. If you want to look at the appellate court, I have a very strong record. And I have a record of having the reputation of being a team player with the judiciary, with the participants in court that I work with every day. And I just believe that my diverse background prior to entering the judiciary, because I wasn't a state attorney, I wasn't the typical judicial candidate, I believe that lends a lot to the position, and it gives a lot of insight into the real world. and different areas other than the criminal law. So for those reasons, I believe that I am the right candidate for the position. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to Mr. Larson. Mr. Larson, welcome. Tell us a little bit about your background and what qualifies you for this office.
Thank you, sir. My name is Lou Larson, and I want to be your next circuit judge. I've been a practicing attorney for more than 28 years, handling the same types of cases that would be heard in my assigned courtroom. I have extensive experience representing plaintiffs and defendants, husbands and wives, businesses and individuals, children and adults, accident victims, crime victims, and even citizens who've passed away. I've been the attorney on both sides of most kinds of the cases that I will hear in our circuit court. I've also represented countless clients who needed the advice necessary to avoid their issue winding up in court. I've helped my clients through the darkest of times. I've been my client's sword, and I've been their shield. Every client is important. Every client deserves my best. If elected to this position, I will give the people that elected me my best without fail. I have an extensive and diverse legal background. I'm the only board certified candidate and have the skills and experience to effectively handle any courtroom assignment on the very first day of work. I believe the best judges have actual hands-on legal experience representing the people and businesses on both sides of the disputes in their courtroom. After more than 28 years practicing law as an advocate, I'm ready to practice law as a neutral. A detailed resume outlining the many practice areas in which I'm versed can be found on my website, larsonforjudge.com. Currently, I'm the managing trial attorney for the litigation department of a statewide private law firm. Prior to that, I worked for approximately 10 years as an of-counsel attorney at Treasure Coast Legal with offices in Stewart and Fort Pierce. For more than 10 years before that, I practiced law in the counties of the Treasure Coast as a sole practitioner with and without associations with other local attorneys. I'm versed in a wide variety of practice areas besides civil and criminal litigation, including family law, wills and trusts, probate, trademarks, copyright, real estate business transactions, and disputes of all kinds. I'm admitted in 6 states and the federal court, which covers our circuit. In 2004, I joined the only 7% of all Florida lawyers when I became a board-certified civil trial lawyer, a distinction that requires documented experience, extensive continuing education, peer review, and ethics in practice. I'm very proud of my board certification, and I've maintained it for the past 16 years. In addition to the required experience, I believe that I possess what is called a judicial temperament, which can be described as demonstrating compassion, decisiveness, open-mindedness, courtesy, patience, freedom from bias, and a commitment to equal justice. In addition to various law-related organizations, I've enjoyed working as a Little League umpire. I'm active at the YMCA and financially support Safe Space, the Humane Society, and United Against Poverty. I'm married to my wife, Catherine. I have a son and a daughter and 2 stepsons. The largest challenges facing the courts today are ensuring that the criminal and civil justice systems move forward safely given the pandemic, and ensuring that the rights of every citizen to a fair and equal justice are not infringed. I believe the pandemic has changed the legal system in at least one positive way. The wide availability, use, and effectiveness of remote court proceedings and procedures has proven to be a time and money saver for those involved. If elected, I would leverage this remote technology to the best advantage of the court system and the public. After an extensive career as a working attorney in our circuit, I can tell you what I expect from a judge, which is what I will deliver as your judge. In my court, you would be treated with respect and given a fair shake. You will get your result without any undue delay or undue expense. I will work hard and never betray the trust you have given me in electing me judge. There would be no higher honor for me than to serve as your next circuit judge.
Okay, very good. Mr. Larson, let's stick with you. We'll ask you this question first. Can you explain your judicial philosophy in plain English?
My judicial philosophy in plain English would be that my job as a judge is not to make the law, but to interpret it. I follow the laws on the books fairly and without regard to things that shouldn't be considered, like my own personal feelings, I need to follow the law. A judge needs to follow the law regardless of their own personal feelings, their own personal attitudes, their own personal sympathies, not make law, not stretch the statutes, but follow them.
Okay, very good. Ms. Griffin, how about you? Explain your judicial philosophy in plain English for everybody.
Well, my judicial philosophy follows along pretty much the same lines as Mr. Larson's does. I agree that we are here to not make the law by any means. We are here to interpret the statutes, and that is not always you do not always have a favorable outcome when you follow the law. When I began this, it was difficult to go into every hearing and understand that you're going to make someone unhappy by what you decide today. So once you're in this position, you have to follow the law. It doesn't matter, as Mr. Larson stated, it doesn't matter what you believe. If you disagree with it, you still have to follow that law. And we are required by the canons also to not be swayed by the unfavorable way that it will come across. Because, I mean, the law is the law, and we are bound to abide by that. And I do give everyone the opportunity to be heard so that the court can make the best decision based on the facts of that case. So, as I stated, it's pretty much the same as Mr. Larson's, is following the law no matter what your personal issue is with it, if any.
Okay, thank you. Let's stick with that topic, and we'll stick with you, Ms. Griffin. Have you ever had to support a legal position that was contrary to your personal beliefs? Tell us about it.
I cannot remember a particular instance where that has happened. I'm going to have to say no, because I cannot remember a particular instance where that happened, where I have not, where I felt different about what I was ruling on. So I'm going to have to say no. Okay,
Mr. Larson, how about you?
Have I ever taken a position contrary to my personal?
Have you ever had to support a legal position that was contrary to your personal beliefs?
Oh, absolutely. I think that criminal defense lawyers have this dilemma all the time. And, you know, people ask, how can you defend somebody when you know they're guilty? Well, the answer to that is because we have a constitution and we have laws. And even though my own personal feelings are maybe that the person is guilty, or in fact, if I know they're guilty, but there's some evidentiary reason, some evidentiary position I need to support that's constitutionally based and a valid argument on behalf of my client, I will do that, because I have a duty not only to the clients and the particular instance and the particular moment, but I have a duty to the entire system and to my job as an officer of the court and to uphold justice.
Okay, very good. I will stick with Mr. Larson on this question. How would you define injustice? What do you perceive as the greatest obstacle to justice, if any?
Injustice. A lot of people think injustice is an unfavorable result, but that's not injustice. Injustice is an unfavorable result because of a lack of fairness in the system. So we have to do whatever we can to make sure that everybody stands on, they start at the starting line at the same place, that nobody gets an advantage, that the system is fair. And granted, there may be some work to do. Nothing's perfect, but I can tell you this, and I tell juries this all the time. There's no better system in the world than the jury system and the justice system that we have in this country.
Okay, very good. Ms. Griffin, how about you? How would you define injustice? What do you perceive as the greatest obstacles to justice?
Well, in injustice, I agree with Mr. Larson that it is more than not having a favorable outcome. It does include things such as equal access to all of the services and all of the information that's available to lawyers. For instance, if there's a pro se litigant who does not know all of that information, I believe that certain systems should be in place for those individuals to be able to obtain that information. And I think the biggest obstacle for the injustice, is by that information being readily available. We have made strides in making that information available. The 19th Circuit has done that, as well as the Florida Supreme Court, with a lot of information that's available online at the Florida Supreme Court and on our circuit webpage, especially in the area of family law, which is what I preside over right now. So another instance of injustice, it's a little bit different. A lot of times I see the children that are involved in cases as exhibiting injustice, because mom and dad are the ones that are having issues, and the focus seems to be taken off of the children and placed on the parents, when it's the children's best interests that need to be taken into consideration. And I characterize that as an injustice as well. I mean, they're not the children are not the ones that have the opportunity to go out and get all the information, but I feel that an injustice is made to them and their position based on what everyone else's role is and what we do as a court on those certain cases.
Okay, very good. Thank you. This question sort of follows from the last. We'll start with Ms. Griffin on this. Do you see a racial disparity in sentencing in our circuit? And if so, is there anything a judge can do about it?
Well, I have not been assigned to the criminal division other than my involvement with the drug court, which included the felony drug court. So I'm not really involved with that part of the judicial system at this point. And I was involved with the juvenile delinquency, of course, in Indian River County. As far as, did you ask what I think would help? What was the last part of your question?
If there are racial disparities in sentencing, what can a judge do about it?
Well, the guidelines are put in place by the statutes. We have to follow that. We have to do what we need to do there. But as far as, I can only talk about experience with the juvenile delinquency sector, I believe that services can be put in place, maybe mentors, maybe something different in the school system to kind of redirect the juveniles to a different path other than just, I know we preach education, and I'm a firm believer in education. That's the top priority, but not everyone is destined to be a student. So I think that they should have certain programs in place. And when I left that assignment, there were things in place and in the works to have different areas for them to show interest in. Maybe it's a trade, maybe it's not school at all. So it's just different services in place, different ways of accessing, different methods of how to go about your daily life and to make you a more productive and more informed citizen, I believe would help in those disparities. That's my answer.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Larson, do you see a racial disparity in sentencing in our circuit? And if so, is there anything a judge can do about it?
Criminal sentencing is very tricky. I mean, there's so many factors at play. I mean, you've got, there's been some talk, there's some news items and such about that lately in our circuit. And frankly, I think some of that's unfair. Criminal sentencing is very tricky. A judge is basically there to ensure that the client's rights are protected. Most criminal sentences are plea agreements worked out between the prosecutors who are charged with proving the crime occurred, dealing with the victims, and the defense lawyers who have potentially valid defenses. And criminal sentencing is very tricky. And perhaps there is some racial disparity. I don't know. I think the answer to that is tracking. I think that if I were a judge, I would keep track. I would keep track of to avoid any kind of appearance of impropriety. I think that detailed tracking of the sentence imposed whether it be by plea agreement, whether it was a plea to the court, whether or not the defendant cooperated with police, whether or not what the victim's attitude was. It's very tricky, and it's hard to just make a blanket statement. Yes, there's racial disparity in sentencing. No, there's not racial disparity in sentencing. It's just very tricky, but I think tracking is the answer. Because if there's explanations and people take the time to listen to it, I think that the problem is less severe than maybe perceived out there these days.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. This question for Mr. Larson first. What are one or two specific things that you think could be improved about the way the circuit court works? Are there ways to increase efficiency or fairness or access or anything like that?
Well, I think that the pandemic has brought the legal profession leaps and bounds ahead much faster than it otherwise normally would go. Traditionally, the bar and the Supreme Court are very slow to adopt to new technological advances. And once the pandemic hit, they loosened up the rules on notary remote depositions, and the court reporter doesn't have to be in the same room as the witness, and lawyers don't have to travel across a couple of counties for a 5-minute hearing, and they click on Zoom, and that's a time and money saver. That's a time and money saver, because private lawyers have to get paid, and they have to get paid fairly for the time they put into a case. If they can spend less time on that, on the routine things, and more time on the substantial, cost-effective parts of the representation, that it improves the client experience, improves the client value, and I think that it improves the system too, because if a judge can have remote hearings, it cuts down on court staff, cuts down on potentially court administration, bailiffs, security. There's just lots of advantages to technology. I think we're just starting in to see some of this. And when the science catches up to the pandemic and we've solved this, which I'm confident that we will, I think some of these changes are going to be here to stay.
Okay, very good. Ms. Griffin, how about you? Is there ways to improve the way the circuit court works?
Well, my opinion on ways to improve how our circuit court works includes a lot of technical advances. As Mr. Larson pointed out, since this pandemic has been going on, there have been leaps and bounds as far as the technology and handling court remotely. In the beginning, when we first got our orders from the Florida Supreme Court that we were not to be in the courtroom, that we were to do everything remotely. Well, at first it was not to do those, to continue that, until we received amendments to the Florida Supreme Court administrative order to set down the parameters of what could and could not be held, what was essential, what was non-essential. And there was, I don't know if it was pushback, but there was hesitancy on behalf of the attorneys in our circuit, at least in my division, to move forward because of the unknown. But by little, everyone got a little bit more accustomed to the Zoom hearings, the submission of evidence by Zoom, the testimony, the swearing in, and the Florida Supreme Court has helped tremendously with setting parameters and for different things and the rules that are relaxed so that allows us to do this. Because of that technological advance, now everyone is back 100% into the swing of things. They are conducting hearings. There's no objections because the Florida Supreme Court says there's only certain things you can object to, and it's not because you just object to a Zoom hearing. But as Mr. Larson indicated, I too agree that once this is over, that a lot of these technological advances will stay, because everyone has the mindset of, okay, I have a hearing in Martin County at 9 o'clock. I can't set a hearing in St. Lucie County at 11 o'clock because there's just not enough time to get there. And I've experienced a lot of that juggling in everyone's minds as to well, wait a minute, yes, I can. And that makes everything much more efficient. I think it's more efficient on the judiciary side, as well as on the attorneys and on the pro se litigants. They are, they're embracing this as well. It allows them to do things and not have to have the cost of, if they live out of state, not have the cost of traveling here, having all the witnesses appear and sit there and wait in the courtroom all day for their testimony to be taken. So these are things that will make the circuit more efficient. It's an unfortunate situation, how it got forced on us all at once. But however, we rose to the challenge, and I believe that the circuit will be much more efficient once this is over with.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. We'll stick with Ms. Griffin on this one. Grade your performance as a judge. Give yourself a letter grade for how well you've done since you've been a judge, A, B, C, D, and then tell us why you gave yourself that grade.
Okay, since I've been a circuit judge, I believe that my grade is an A. And the reason being, as I stated in the opening, was that, anyone that feels that they have an unfair ruling by the court has the opportunity to file an appeal with the 4th District Court of Appeal. That is a remedy for anyone who believes that they have been wronged in some way, or the court has not considered a certain point that they believe that was important and relevant. And the cases that have been appealed, the rulings rather that have been appealed on cases that I have handled, there are very few reversals. I believe the last count I looked at, there were 80 appeals that were actually filed, and 3 of those were reversed. And there were 2 others that were affirmed in part and reversed in part. So when you calculate the percentage, that's less than 5% of reversal. So I believe that is what makes me a good judge. I listen to the information. That's the key, I think, to being a good judge. Listening. That is the most important. Listen to what is said, because if you do the talking, you're not really hearing the facts of the case. So listen, number one, and apply the law as you're to apply it, based on the statutes, based on the case law, whatever the case may be, and do that in an unbiased fashion. Another thing that makes me believe that my grade would be an A is because of as I stated in the opening as well, is the good rapport that I have with the participants of the court, including attorneys, clerks, deputies, case managers, everyone that I've worked with. I mean, I have really good feedback that I am easy to work with. I am respectful. I have a calm temperament. I'm fair. And one of the maybe downfalls is that some say that I listen too much, that I allow people to talk too much. But I believe it's their day in court. This is the day that they've been waiting for, and given the number of cases, they've been waiting for it for quite some time. And I believe it's important to hear them out and give them their day in court. So those are the reasons why I feel that would be my grade.
Okay, thank you very much. Throw the question to Mr. Larson. Mr. Larson, can you give your opponent a grade here, a letter grade, and then tell us why you would give her that grade for her performance as a judge?
Well, I'm not going to answer that. First of all, I haven't had only very limited direct experience in her courtroom. And frankly, I'm not going to run a campaign like that. I'm going to talk about my qualifications and not my opponent's deficiencies. So the answer is I won't answer that question. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next question. While a judge has to be unbiased, nonpartisan position, tell us whether you're registered as a Republican or a Democrat, and how does your political philosophy inform or influence your judicial philosophy? I'll start with Mr. Larson.
I'm sorry, but I can't answer that one either because judges are prohibited by the canons in aligning themselves with any political party. It's a nonpartisan position. The last thing that we want to do, either one of us coming out of this campaign, is to face a bar complaint or a JQC complaint. So I'm not going to talk about my personal political philosophies. I can talk about my qualifications to be a judge. I can talk about what I would do as far as administration of justice, but I follow the rules, I follow the law, I follow the canons, and I'm not going to answer that question either. I'm sorry, respectfully.
Okay, fair enough. Ms. Griffin?
He is absolutely right. The canons, the Code of Judicial Conduct prohibit us specifically from talking about any political position that we have, or we're prohibited from doing that. And I agree with Mr. Larson. It's inappropriate for us to discuss that.
Okay, fair enough. Let's move on to the next question. We'll start with Ms. Griffin. This gives voters maybe insight to the character of the candidates. Tell us about an instance any time in your life, doesn't have to be as a lawyer or as a judge, in which you faced an ethical dilemma, and how did you resolve it?
An ethical dilemma?
Yes.
Is that okay? And you're asking not just while I've been a judge, anytime.
Correct.
Let me think about that for a second. You stumped me there. Let me think about it. I don't know of a specific instance where I've thought about there was an ethical dilemma, because I follow the law. I don't know, could you be more specific of what you're actually asking for?
No, just, if there's ever an instance where, I don't know, there's been a question of right or wrong and you've had to choose, that sort of thing, but that it was a tough question. It's okay. If you don't have an answer, we can move on. That's fine.
I don't have an answer for you. I'm going to continue to think about that and give you an answer before we conclude.
Okay, that's fine. Mr. Larson, how about you? Can you tell us about an instance in your life when you faced an ethical dilemma, how you might have resolved it?
Sure. As a lawyer, practicing lawyer representing real people, there's ethics situations that come up constantly. You have a potential conflict of interest with a client. You have other ethical rules, specifically bar rules, that you need to have make a sound, moral, proper legal decision. The bar, Florida Bar, has an ethics hotline. They're somewhat helpful, but they're not that helpful. Normally, you have to trust your gut, and a lot of times, and most of the times, the reason that there's an ethical problem is because the right decision is usually the hard one. It's the one that costs you money. It's the one that costs you time. It's the one that costs you effort. But it's the one that you make, and you can still look at yourself in the mirror every day and say, I did the right thing.
Okay, very good. I've got one more question for the candidates, and then I'm going to open it up to our board members if they have anything they want to add or any additional questions they'd like to ask. Obviously, judge is an extremely important position, particularly for the people who will come and stand before you. We'll start with Mr. Larson on this one. What differentiates you from your opponent? Why should voters vote for you instead of voting to send the incumbent back to office?
Well, I'm glad you asked it that way rather than giving my opponent a letter grade. But the answer to that is that I have a lot more experience doing a lot more different kinds of things than she does. I've tried a lot more cases, I would venture to say. I've handled a lot more clients than I would guess. I've listened to many more clients, without actually being in court, preserved attorney-client confidences. I just have a lot more real world, real lawyer experience than she does.
Okay, very good. I'm going to flip the question to Ms. Griffin. Ms. Griffin, why should voters give you another chance? Why should you be sent back to office? Why shouldn't they vote for Mr. Larson instead?
Because I have a track record of being on the judiciary. I have the experience. It's very different than being an attorney, being on the bench. You just learn something, more than one thing, every single day. It's constantly changing, constantly updating the information. The laws, the case law comes in almost daily, and I feel that with that judicial experience, it will make me a better candidate for this position because I know what the job entails. I've lived it. I'm dedicated to this position. I want to finish the work that I have started. The 6 years goes by extremely fast, and I just want to continue to be able to try and make a difference in the lives of our community, of the members of our community and their families. And being a judge, you are forced to make those decisions for the individuals. And I believe that because of my temperament and because of my experience on the judiciary, it makes me a better candidate for the position. I listen to people. I mean, these are things that I've already said, but I firmly believe that I am the better candidate for this position for those reasons. That I believe that I'm a good judge, and I want to continue serving the citizens of our circuit. It's an honor, it's a privilege, it's the most amazing thing that I have ever been involved with. And I mean, that's the only way that I can explain it. It's amazing, and I love it, and I want to continue serving.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Let me open it the floor to Larry or Louise here. Do either of you have any questions you'd like to ask? Larry, you're muted.
Thank you. I'm unmuted now, I hope.
Yes.
But just a couple of questions, perhaps. First one, we'll start with Judge Griffin. Is there something in your career, a case in your career, you don't have to get into the specific details or people or anything like that, but is there one thing that really makes you realize that you made the right decision to be a lawyer?
Yes. Yes, there is. Would you like me to talk about it?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. Not cases when I was a lawyer, but as a judge. And it's just going to be a nothing specific as far as actual case, as you indicated, that would be inappropriate. But to be able to preside over the dependency cases, they're near and dear to my heart. They pull on your heartstrings, and to be able to be a part of that makes it all worthwhile. When you're involved in a case and you help these children and help them rise up and conquer everything that has been pushing them down over and over and over again, there's a sense of not accomplishment for yourself, but you feel good that you help them get through that traumatic period in their lives. And then when you get full circle to, I mean, not all of them in that way, but some end in an adoption, and that just makes everything full circle. And that is just the pinnacle, I believe, of the role of an attorney, and then having the opportunity and the privilege to preside over these cases, to be able to help a child during that traumatic period in their life. And hopefully, later on in life, they'll realize what everyone did for them. It's not just the judge, it's everyone involved. in that child's life, the guardian ad litem, the case managers, that just so many people are involved in helping that child succeed. And that is an example.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Mr. Larson?
Question was, have there been any moments where I realized I was really happy that I became a lawyer? Is that the question?
Yes. Yes.
Well, I think that it's, not every day is different for one thing, and you can't please everyone. But when you really make a difference for somebody, where a person comes to you, like I said in my little intro, that they're in their darkest hour, they're scared to death, and you help them find a way. You're either their sword or their shield, and you do a good job. And you know what? Even if the result isn't there, as long as you've done a good job, they realize it, and that is making a difference in the lives of the clients. That is the main reward of being an attorney. Absolutely, it's the people, and it's most rewarding when they come back, which they do.
Thank you. One more question. Mr. Larson, we'll start with you first, but there were several other judge seats up this year. You picked this one. Is there a reason you picked this over the others?
Yes. Well, I prefer to run against for a vacant seat, but Judge Vaughn, during the qualifying period, I had announced for his seat, and it wasn't clear to me that he was going to seek re-election. And then when he announced, I picked I then tried to switch to Judge Bronis's seat, but she announced a delayed resignation, which caused her seat to go to appointment. So there were no vacant seats. I chose Judge Griffin because she's the only judge on there who has not been vetted by the JNC Judicial Nominating Commission, and really hasn't faced a contested election. When she was elected 6 years ago, during qualifying, she was running against a longtime incumbent, Larry Shack, and for unexplained reasons that I still don't know, in the middle of the qualifying period, Judge Shack withdrew, leaving no opponent and no time for anyone else to get in the race. And the reason I'm running against Judge Griffin is because she has not been vetted by either the JNC and subject to appointment by the governor, and not really faced a contested election.
Thank you. Judge Griffin, can you explain 6 years ago how you ended up running against Judge Shack, how you picked that seat as opposed to any other one?
Well, as I believe that I spoke about during an interview with TCPalm way back then, I looked at the different judges, how long they've been there, and I thought that it may be time for a change. And I put in for that slot. I had never met Judge Shack. I didn't know anything about him other than, his time on the bench. And I would say that I was very fortunate that he did withdraw from the election. The only reasons that I know of why he did that was, he thought about it, and it's the same reasons that everyone else found out about. I received it in an email. I think it was an email that went out to all kinds of people at the same time. So it was just looking and searching and talking with people and trying to figure out where would it be most beneficial to try and make a difference, a change. And those are the reasons.
Okay, thank you. Louise, do you have any questions?
No.
Okay, thanks. Maybe if you'd like to, Judge Griffin, if you want to take a minute or so, it's up to you. Is there something we missed? Is there something you'd like to talk about before we end this?
Well, I told you that I wanted to circle back around to the ethical dilemma question that you had asked. Is it all right if I answer that now?
Sure.
All right. There was a situation, I'm not going to go into names, where cases that I was presiding over, there were some inferences of wrongdoing by an attorney on the cases, and it was an ethical dilemma, I guess. I never would have not done it, but it makes you think, and you look up the rules and what a judge is required to do. And that was a situation where I didn't question that I would do the right thing, but I made sure that I was doing the right thing, that was something that I needed to do as far as letting someone know that there may be an issue. So that, I just wanted to answer that because I thought about that while Mr. Larson was answering the question. And as far as any type of closing statement, I guess you're asking me if I would like to give, is that right?
Sure, if you'd like to.
All right. Well, like I've said already, I've been honored and privileged to serve in this capacity as for the 19th Judicial Circuit for the last 5.5 years. My only wish is that the public will support me and allow me to continue and continue with the work that I've started. Like I said, I'm the only candidate with judicial experience, and I believe that says a lot as far as a candidate is concerned for a judicial spot. I have a professional demeanor, a calm temperament, and I'm prepared every day for the cases over which I preside. I do the homework that's necessary to make the right decisions. My record reflects that for the most part, the decisions are correct, and the appellate court will change that if that is something that needs to be done. My diverse experience prior to joining the judiciary, plus my experience on the bench, I believe uniquely qualifies me as the right candidate. I love what I do, and I would be honored to receive votes to allow me to stay in this position, whether it be by now, obviously most everything is going to be mail-in ballots, whether it be mail-in ballot, an early voting, or even at the election, the primary election on August 18th. I want everyone to understand that their vote is very important. It's important for your voice to be heard, whether it's for me, whether it's for Mr. Larson, or whomever, and whatever race it is, not just a judicial race, but your vote is important. And I also want to say that your judge matters. Just because you don't have that much to do with the judicial arena, the court system, it's very important to have the right person in that position to make the decisions, to assist the families with things that they cannot obviously sort out for themselves. And that is what we are tasked to do. And as I stated, those will not always result in favorable outcomes for everyone involved. However, I listen to everyone. I'm respectful to everyone, and I make decisions unbiased and following the law. So if anyone wanted to learn anything more, they can go to the website that's been set up by my committee, www.judgegriffin2020.com. And I guess for now, thank you, and everyone stay well out there.
Thank you. Mr. Larson?
Well, I'm going to keep it short. I know that a lot of people appreciate that, but with me, you would get a judge that has a lot of experience on both sides of the case that is before them. You get a judge that knows what they're doing. You're going to get your result quickly, and you're going to get your result without any undue expense. So I'd be proud, and it'd be no higher honor than for me to be your next judge. Thank you. That's it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Judge Griffin and Mr. Larson, both candidates here. We appreciate your time. We appreciate you answering our questions for our viewers here. For everyone out there, if you want to, if you didn't get to see this entire interview today, it's on our social media feeds. Check our Facebook page. Check tcpalm.com/elections for the candidates' completed questionnaires and all of our election coverage from now through the August 18th election and beyond, of course. I'm columnist Gil Smart. I want to thank Larry Reisman, Louis Philippine, for being here. Thank you very much to the candidates again, Judge Griffin and Mr. Larson. Thank you, and good luck to everybody.